What is up, everyone? Welcome into another edition of our NBA DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Monday, November 15th. We have a large 11-game slate after having somewhat of smaller slates on Saturday and Sunday over the weekend. Back to a massive one with a ton of news tonight. Before we get started, last time we were on the podcast, I asked you guys to predict Paul George's points. Turns out he actually had a down game. Everyone predicted over. I think the closest was 27. He actually scored 23, but shot 10 of 17. So really good game, super efficient. They just really didn't need him that much as they had an easy win for tonight. A lot of players to choose from, but let's go with Spencer Dinwiddie's points. Drop in the comments below how many points you believe Spencer Dinwiddie scores. He's averaging 16.1 on the season, and in the last game with Bradley Beal out, he scored 23. Beal will be out once again. We'll kind of go over that with the injury news. But in the comments below, Spencer Dinwiddie's point total, that is real points, not fantasy points, of what he will score tonight. Also, if you enjoy this video, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content that we put out. And then any questions or comments you have, drop them below, and I will be in throughout the day to answer anything. In these videos, I always say, it's kind of weird, every single episode we have a big slate. I always say I'm not going to go over too many people, just a few at each position, and then I end up just kind of saying a ridiculous amount of names. I'm really going to try to stick to that, give some conviction on guys that are sticking out right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that it won't change by game time tomorrow as we get more news and as I dig even deeper into this, because obviously these are recorded the night before. But I'm going to try to stick to a very small group of people at each position, go over them, talk about the guys that I really like and that really stick out at the moment, kind of each pricing tier. And then if you guys have any questions about anyone that I didn't, talk about, feel free to drop those players in the comments, or you can get into our free Discord at chatdfs.com. That can be found in the description below. You can also find all of our free content, which I'll be writing an article, the game theory article, tomorrow at dfskarma.com. That's completely free as well. Or you can purchase our Core Plays subscription, get into our premium Discord, which, we're kind of talking a little bit more in there than our free, but we kind of post everything everywhere. So there are some perks. You get all of the experts, you get first access to us, all that kind of stuff for the premium. You will get our projections along with all of our core plays. A lot of great stuff coming with our core plays package, which can be found on the site or at dfskarma.com/pricing. Again, that is in the description. You can just click the little show more, and you'll find basically anything that you need from us. But we can start this off with injury news because there's quite a bit and a lot that at this point we don't necessarily know. To begin with, Jaylen Brown is going to be out. I believe he's out 2 more games at least, but he will be out tonight. Lauri Markkanen, Lamar Stevens, and Kevin Love all out tonight. I believe they're expected to return in Cleveland's next game. Bradley Beal, as we said, has already been ruled out. Davis Bertans out as well. Etuan Moore has been ruled out. Jalen Suggs is questionable tonight. Chris Duarte is questionable. Nerlens Noel also questionable. Markieff Morris out. Jimmy Butler, and then on the other side, Mike Muscala. Both of them are questionable, while Derek Favors is doubtful. Austin Rivers got hurt last night. It went to the locker room and then returned as of this podcast, so I would assume that he's going to play. Michael Porter Jr. already ruled out with a lower back injury. He's out for at least a few more games. Will Barton was ruled out oddly for, I believe it was lower back stiffness last night. I would anticipate that he plays tonight, and they were just kind of giving him a little bit of rest on a back-to-back. But that's definitely something to at least keep in mind, that Will Barton was ruled out with back tightness last night. DeAndre Ayton didn't play in Phoenix's last game. He is questionable once again tonight. Obviously, Frank Kaminsky and JaVale McGee benefit from that. Fred VanVleet, Precious Achiuwa, Chris Boucher, all questionable. So that's going to be quite a bit of news for Toronto that we need to keep an eye on. Damian Lillard was ruled out last night, but I believe he's expected to play tonight. And then Nikola Vucevic, obviously out. Colby White, I believe that he is going to play. This will be the first game of the season that he's playing, so I don't expect him to get a ton of minutes. Kind of muddies up the Bulls' rotation a little bit, though. Obviously, Zach LaVine isn't going to lose minutes. I wouldn't really expect Lonzo Ball to lose that many minutes either. And we could see the three of them on the court at the same time, I suppose. I guess this probably dings Alex Caruso the most, but it's going to be kind of interesting to see where they go, because I guess like LaVine could really just shift over to small forward if they wanted, but with DeMar DeRozan at power forward, they're playing really, really small. I guess it wouldn't be shocking because they were just running small ball basically the entire season. But I don't necessarily know what's going to happen with Kobe White and whose minutes he's going to steal, but it's a really good spot for guards against the Lakers, specifically with point guards. So Lonzo Ball kind of interesting, but not sure you can really trust him, knowing that White does have the ability to run point. And then LeBron James is out. Not honestly sure when he's going to return. It doesn't make any sense for LA to rush him, but he will be back, I would assume, relatively soon. He's already been out for quite some time. Moving over to position by position, I'm going to try to keep only a few players. We'll see how this goes once I start really getting into them. Just kind of in different pricing tiers that I'm going to look at. Up top, anyone 9,000 or above, this likely isn't a spot that I'm going to go tonight. But if you're looking up top, I think the number one option would have to be Ja Morant. Gets the matchup against Houston, who not a defense that I'm even slightly concerned with. He scored 50 plus in 4 consecutive. He comes with even more upside than that, and it's just kind of been the breakout season for Ja Morant that a lot of people thought was coming. So I do think that if you're paying up at the position tonight, he's probably my top option. Kind of hard to get away from Luka, who just dropped 80 in his last game. But for the price, I do prefer Ja Morant at the moment. I think that he's in a very good spot. No issues whatsoever with that. As you move down, 7,200, Spencer Dinwiddie, he took over completely. He shot 10 of 18, 3 of 9 from 3. Obviously, we know that he comes with triple-double potential, and this is kind of his team at the moment with Bradley Beal out. So he dropped nearly 50 fantasy points in Washington's last game. Now he gets a great matchup against the New Orleans Pelicans, who don't really have much rim protection. So I do think that Spencer Dinwiddie at 7,200 is still a bit too cheap with Beal out, because I would assume that he continues to take over the offense. So just a really good spot there. Down a little bit farther, sticking kind of in this mid-tier, Dennis Schroeder is 6,500. He's been starting with Jaylen Brown out. Obviously, Brown out again. Schroeder is coming off of a 28-point game against the Cavs. He didn't do all that much in terms of peripheral stats, so he still only dropped 36 fantasy points, but easily hit value at his current price tag. In the game before that, he dropped 53. Cleveland's really struggled against point guards this season, so I do think that Dennis Schroeder is a very good option at 6,500. There are a few plays as you kind of continue down that make sense. I think the number one option that you're probably doing would just be dropping, pretty far down to, I guess, whichever one probably grabs the start for Washington. Aaron Holiday played 34 minutes in their last game. I know when Beal was out before, Holiday started as well, so I would assume if I'm picking between the two, it's Aaron Holiday over Raul Neto. He's not really overly reliant on scoring. I know to really find a ceiling, obviously his shot has to be falling. That's essentially true of most players in the NBA. But he can contribute at some level in each of the 5 categories. Obviously, you're not really going to get 3 or 4 blocks, but he can lay down 1 along with a few rebounds, some assists, and steals. So if he's getting 30 plus minutes, I think that is going to be a relatively obvious option at 3,500. for, cash games, you're probably just realistically plugging him in at either point guard or shooting guard. As we move to shooting guard, up top, we now have Brandon Ingram switched over to the shooting guard position. He returned in the last game, played 29 minutes. I'd like to see where his minutes, if they're going to put him on a minutes restriction, but if he's back up to minutes in the high 30s, low 40s, at 8,500, I have no issues whatsoever playing him against the Washington Wizards. I like the matchup. It should be a fast-paced game. And obviously, he's one of the top players, but if he's only going to play around 29 minutes again, I think he has the potential to essentially hit value, but I wouldn't truly be banking on it. If that were the case, I would probably bump up, I would say, to either Devin Booker, or I think you could move down to someone like CJ McCollum, even with Damian Lillard returning. As you move down a bit more, there aren't that many options that I'm absolutely in love with. I feel like there's obviously the guys that I named at point guard, like Dennis Schroeder, you can use at shooting guard, but in the mid-tier, it's just not overly loaded with guys that I necessarily want to play at the moment. I think I would rather drop down to someone like Cade Cunningham. He's taking plenty of shots. 3 games ago against Houston, he took 18. He's taking a ton of threes as well, finally hitting some of them, and his price is down to 5,500. I thought he was closer to 6 at one point, but I guess he actually was only like 5,600, so not really that crazy. He's flashed plenty of upside. We know that he comes with plenty of rebound potential, plenty of assist potential. Blocks and steals will be there just because of his length, even though he hasn't really flashed it on a consistent basis. That's essentially true of the majority of rookies in the NBA. It's a league that kind of takes you a hot minute to get used to. Everyone excluding Evan Mobley, I guess he kind of has just completely taken over for Rookie of the Year at this point, and really seems pretty easy that he's going to do that. But I do think that Cade Cunningham against Sacramento, I really like this matchup, and he's going to be locked into 30-plus minutes. So when you're on a team like Detroit and Cunningham has the reins to just kind of completely take over and do anything that he wants, the upside will always be there in that type of a situation. So I do think that he's a very viable option. Lou Dort is a little too cheap at 5,000. He's been shooting the ball absurdly well. He's actually taking a surprising amount of shots for Oklahoma City. I don't love the matchup against Miami, but I guess if Jimmy Butler's out, you're not necessarily that worried about it. I don't expect Dort to really be playing around the rim all that much. About half his shots, maybe a little more, are going to come from outside. So I'm completely fine using someone like Lou Dort. I'm not overly worried about Bam Adebayo essentially stopping what he's doing offensively. And then he can add rebounds. He's not going to light up the scoreboard with assists, but he can get steals and boards on any given night. So I do think that Lou Dort at 5K is completely in play. As for anyone cheaper than that, at the moment, I think obviously Aaron Holiday here does make sense. If you want another cheap option for the same price with a ton of upside, Cameron Payne, he just posted 35.5 fantasy points in 22 minutes. 20 minutes the other night against Memphis. His game tonight, as I'm recording this, isn't over, so I can't tell you what he did, but 20 minutes, he took 13 shots. He's coming off the bench. He's only going to play around 20 minutes, but he's shooting a ton of shots. So if it's falling, he'll score plenty. You essentially need him to be scoring, though. And at 3,500, he comes with significantly more upside than than his price tag suggests. The other option would be Josh Richardson, who I believe he's probable at the moment. I think he got bumped up today to probable. He's been playing big minutes for Boston with Jaylen Brown out in recent games, so I would anticipate that keeps coming. I was going to save him for small forward, but a pretty fine cash game play, or GPP really, at shooting guard tonight as well. Shifting to small forward, you have like Brandon Ingram here. I wouldn't necessarily say there's anyone at the top that I really want to play. I think that you're fine if you want to take your shot on like Luka Doncic, Jason Tatum. I have no problems with any of those guys, even like Jimmy Butler, assuming he's healthy and has a full workload. There's no one that I necessarily really want to play, though. I think as you move down a little bit, you can look at someone like Dylan Brooks. He got up to 31 minutes in his last game. Very clearly a massive part of their offense in 2 games. One game was actually limited minutes. He's taken 18 and 17 shot attempts. He can add rebounds, assists, steals on any given night. He scored 39 fantasy points in 26 minutes against Charlotte. Now he gets a matchup against Houston, who has one of the worst defenses. They're one of the younger teams in the NBA. They're not overly good. I wouldn't be overly concerned with them defensively stopping someone like Dylan Brooks, and there should be plenty of opportunities for steals in that game as well. So I do think at 6,500 he's in play, but I also believe that he comes with a little bit of risk. So it's not like I'm going to lock him in, I guess, especially for the price tag. With that being said, I don't really like small forward all that much. I think on the other side, Jayshawn Tate comes with more than enough upside to at least be considered. Sometimes he struggles with fouls, which can limit his minutes. Sometimes the Rockets kind of pull them, but recently he's been more or less locked into bigger minutes, excluding the game against Portland. A little bit of a blowout. He struggled with fouls. But prior to that, he played 29 plus in, I believe, 5 straight. So I don't really have any issues with Jayshawn Tate at 5,300. He's a double-double threat, and he can score relatively well if he's shooting at a high percentage, which he does have the capability to do. He's not really a volume scorer, with someone like Jalen Green really taking a lot of the shot attempts, even Kevin Porter Jr. So I do think that Tate is viable. I don't think they're going to use Dylan Brooks and his defense against him. I think they'll probably swap guys around. But 5,300 just feels a little bit too cheap for the potential that he brings. And then on the other side, in terms of just being too cheap for the pure upside, it's not really a cash game play. But Kyle Anderson, obviously, I love the matchup against Houston. I have no issues whatsoever with that type of thing. He's coming. His minutes more or less are all over the place. In his last 4 games, he's played anywhere from 18 to 28. When he played 18, he scored 11 fantasy points. When he played 28, he scored 36. He's performed well on a per minutes basis, right around 1 fantasy point per minute on the season. When he's gotten bigger minutes, he's flashed plenty of upside. So put him in a good matchup against Houston, who obviously you can score fantasy points in a hurry against. On top of that, Kyle Anderson does have some pretty drastic home road splits this season. It's only 13 games, so nothing that we really want to take too into account. But he's averaging over 1 fantasy point per minute at home. He's averaging well under 1 on the road. So I do think that Kyle Anderson at 4,400 makes a great tournament option. I probably don't go there in cash games. You don't really need the savings that bad, especially at this position. So I think that's a fine tournament play in cash, especially at this position. If you just are looking more or less for complete savings, you probably move down to someone like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who is going to be locked into most likely 30-plus minutes in this game. He shot 3 of 13 in the last game with Bradley Beal out, still scored 20 fantasy points. So I do think that he's viable at 4,100, not necessarily my favorite option, but most likely I'm not going to be playing someone that I absolutely love because I don't really like that many people at the position. Hopefully that changes throughout the day. But nothing's guaranteed, and there's been a few nights where I've kind of just had to make the decision of what I want to do at small forward because there's not all that many players on more or less most any given night that I necessarily love. No one that I generally am thrilled to lock in, more or less just plays that I feel like I have to make. So, it kind of is what it is. It's a bad position, and just the way that the pricing is, there's so many guys that, you kind of want to use, but they're a little bit too pricey. I think one guy that comes to mind at this point is OG Anunoby. if Fred VanVleet's out, if other guys are ruled out where they don't have extra bodies to pick up minutes and there aren't other options that are going to take over the offense, I think he'll be relatively fine. But at the moment, with Pascal Siakam back, he's just not taking the 20-plus shot attempts, and it kind of limits the upside, especially because he's kind of more or less priced up as if he is the star of the offense. And with Siakam back, you have Scotty Barnes kind of eating into that as well. There's just not enough to go around that I want to pay $7,500 for him. Moving to power forward, I feel like this is a significantly better position. A lot of options that I would be completely fine using. Siakam's back into full minutes and essentially playing quite a bit of center. He gets a matchup against Portland. I actually do like him. He's coming off of a 54 fantasy point performance. He flashed triple-double upside in that game. He went 25, 12, and 7. So at 8,300, I do think that he's in play. The problem is he's priced the same as DeMar DeRozan, who has flashed throughout the season, and then Domantas Sabonis is just a little bit more expensive. I don't like either of their matchups. I much prefer Siakam in the matchup against Portland versus either of them. So Siakam's probably my top option there. I do think that Evan Mobley is a great play. He played 40 minutes against Boston in his last game. One of the big things is that the Cleveland Cavaliers only scored 91 points in that game. Super low scoring game, and it's not as if Cleveland generally drops these massive games. But 91 is a really low scoring game. And Evan Mobley still scored 42 fantasy points. Boston, as we know, has really struggled against power forwards throughout the season. I think that Evan Mobley's just in another great spot, especially with Love and Markkanen out, where he's going to be locked into very solid minutes. And if that's the case, he can contribute in each of the 5 categories. He has elite steal and block potential. And obviously, we're at the point in the season where most people believe that Evan Mobley is going to run away with the Rookie of the Year. And if he's really going to solidify it this early, he kind of needs to keep these massive games happening, or else someone's just going to sneak back in at some point with Jalen Green and Cade Cunningham coming with plenty of upside and a lot of season left. So I guess that's a little bit of a narrative to play, that Evan Mobley could have extra motivation, essentially, to the point where big games could more or less not certify this early, but really separate himself in terms of just pure Rookie of the Year candidates. At 6,700, Kyle Kuzma without Bradley Beal makes a really good option. He's going to take a lot of threes. He gets a plus matchup against the New Orleans Pelicans. So I do think that Kyle Kuzma is a very solid option. Don't get me wrong. There are other great plays around this price tag that I will be considering throughout the day that I do want to take a look at. But Kuzma's kind of the option that really sticks out and kind of pops off the page just because his role in the offense is going to be extremely large. I need to see this. So it's kind of in a weird spot. Carmelo Anthony drew the start last night. I don't have the results of that game at the moment, but I need to see what the Lakers are doing with their starting lineup. If Anthony's starting once again, I do think that he's going to be viable against Chicago. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a must start or anything like that, but we do know that he has plenty of scoring capabilities. He's averaging 16.1 points per game. That's not fantasy points, that's real life points. He played 37 minutes the other night, dropped 29 real life points. So the upside in terms of just pure scoring and what he can do when on the court is still there, especially for 5,300, even if the matchup isn't great. So I do need to see what the Los Angeles Lakers are looking to do prior to making a decision on someone like that. Another player that I'm interested in for cheap, that more or less I want to know if they're starting or not. And truthfully, it may not matter all that much because his minutes haven't taken the jump up. But I do believe that if he's starting, it's kind of more likely that he sees 25 plus minutes in that type of a game. Whereas if he's coming off the bench, I don't really expect them to give him bigger minutes, and that's Jared Vanderbilt. For 3,600 and a matchup against Phoenix, this is especially if DeAndre Ayton is out, Vanderbilt comes with more than enough upside to beat his price tag, especially if he is given 25 plus minutes. The big thing is he doesn't necessarily need that. If he's only given 18, he does have the ability to beat his current price, but he's played 20 plus minutes, I guess 25 plus minutes in 3 of his last 10. In those games, he scored 24, 20, and 34. It's a very easy option if I knew that he was playing 25 plus minutes. I doubt he is. It's just, once again, when he is locked into the starting lineup, it's kind of puts him in a better position to get those bigger minutes versus when he's coming off the bench. He kind of needs to immediately hit his stride, and then Minnesota gives him a little bit extra stay in the game. Another guy that is a little bit too cheap, Elise Johnson. Could have saved him for center, but just wanted to make sure that I got him out here. 21 minutes 2 games ago against Golden State. He scored 19 fantasy points in that, which isn't going to blow anyone away. I don't have the results of his game yesterday once again at the moment because I'm recording this the night before. You're probably sick of hearing that, but I just want to make sure that it's clear in case anyone's watching this and was like, why didn't you mention his last game? Johnson posted some massive games in limited minutes earlier in his career for Brooklyn. So I do think as long as he's getting 20 plus minutes, that's a relatively easy play at 3,400. He should pretty easily hit value at that point. And obviously, Nikola Vucevic is still out for this game. Moving to center, if you're at the top, I think it's really, really tough not to just immediately consider Nikola Jokic. 11,700 is a ton, but he has just been scoring like crazy. He's a triple-double threat every single game. On top of that, he has 20-20 potential. On top of that, he can score 35-plus real points on literally any given night. He can add blocks. He can add assists. Everything's there for essentially the perfect fantasy player. He scored 46.5 fantasy points in 25 minutes against Dallas. I believe that was the game he got injured. I think he only played, might have been into the third quarter a little bit, but essentially the first half, if that's the game that I'm actually thinking of. If not, no, that's not the game. He came back from injury against Dallas is what happened. He got injured against Utah, came back from injury against Dallas, and they beat them by 31, I think. So he just really wasn't needed, and that was his first game back. Nearly triple-doubled in 25 minutes, scored 46.5 fantasy points, and there aren't that many guys in the NBA that I feel comfortable paying almost $12,000 for. Nikola Jokic is one of them, especially in a matchup against someone like Dallas. As you move down a little bit, the player that immediately sticks out would be Jonas Valanciunas. He's seen a little more ups and downs in recent games versus early in the season. He was just dominating everyone, but he gets a great matchup against the Washington Wizards, who don't have a post presence that's going to stop him. They're too small. It's just a really good type of game for him. So if he decides that he wants to take over the offense, I do believe that he has the ability to. Similar to Nikola Jokic, he's a guy that does come with some 20-20 upside. Most likely he's not going to get that many rebounds, but it is there. He is a double-double threat as well that can add assists, blocks, or steals on any given night. 9,100 is a little high in price. I don't necessarily want to pay that much, but I'm also not opposed to that. Moving down another 1,000, I know these are kind of higher priced guys that I'm sitting at, but I believe that I'm going to pay up at this position at the moment. I do like most centers against Oklahoma City. That range true for Bam Adebayo. He's probable to play in this game. We've just seen ridiculous upside. I believe only a couple of games ago he scored nearly 60 fantasy points against the Los Angeles Lakers, and this is essentially as good of a matchup that he can get. So Bam Adebayo at 8,100 does make quite a bit of sense. I really, really like him. As you move down, not all that many centers that are overly appealing. I do think that you can use Frank Kaminsky or JaVale McGee if DeAndre Ayton's out. Both of them come with plenty of upside. If you want to use someone like Isaiah Stewart, another high upside guy, Kelly Olynyk, obviously out for quite some time. Assuming he doesn't really struggle with fouls, this is the type of game that Stewart should get 30-plus minutes. Richaun Holmes isn't an overly large center. Sacramento does like to go small quite a bit. So Isaiah Stewart at only 5,000, knowing that he comes with plenty of scoring upside. He comes with double-double upside. He can add blocks at a relatively high rate as well. I do think that he's a bit too cheap and that you can use him probably in all leagues. I lean more towards tournaments just because I don't necessarily trust him to stay out of foul trouble. Richaun Holmes is relatively solid at garnering fouls when he wants, but I do think that he's at least viable to be considered in cash games. I just don't really think that you necessarily have to go there. Below him, there's not a ton of players that really stick out at the moment that I necessarily want to use. I will say his minutes have been low, but the upside is available for someone like Mitchell Robinson. They may need him against Miles Turner. So I do think at 4,000, if you want to use someone like that, no problems. Alperen Sengun also comes with quite a bit of upside. Robert Covington, although his minutes have dropped back down again, so I'll probably avoid that. But I don't know. I feel like center is a position that I really do want to pay up for. There's a lot of elite plays, and there are quite a few salary relief options at other positions. So at center tonight, I probably spend up, even though I do think that there are a couple very good salary relief plays, with Isaiah Stewart really sticking out as the best one. But that about does it. Once again, comment below how many points you believe Spencer Dinwiddie is going to score tonight without Bradley Beal. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy the content. Also, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything. Thank you for watching. Ask any questions that you have in the comments below as well. I will answer them throughout the day. Good luck tonight. I'm sure either me or someone else will be back for Tuesday. And good luck.